The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crambuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Karen Reed, is she guilty or not guilty? And what is unthinkable about that? We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on what we call the fastest minutes in podcasting. And tonight we're going to do Charlie Crime Talk with host James Buckland, who is our producer. James, how are you doing, my friend? And
Doing
what
good.
A case we have, huh?
Yeah, you give a lot of information on the podcast. And for those that haven't listened to the podcast, they need to go back. Listen to that podcast. There's a lot of individual detail about all the parties involved in this case.
Yeah, if you're looking for Karen Reed stuff, we got it, no doubt about it. Hey, by the way, James, how about letting the folks know where they can catch us out there, those that are just on the YouTube channel, how they can catch the other programs that we're involved in.
All right. Thank you, Charlie. I will do that. Well, here at Charlie Crimebuster, we welcome comments, suggestions, opinions, and whether you agree or disagree with us, we still want to hear your opinion and hear your view on any given topic. We still want to hear from you. So reach out with a shout out. CharlieCrimebuster@gmail.com. That's CharlieCrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. And if you reach out with a shout out or text Charlie, we will give you some behind the scenes updates and maybe even some more information, intel that we didn't release on our podcasts. But our podcast today is being sponsored by PeacemakerNetwork.com, and we want to say thank you to all those who support our podcast and the men and women, first responders, law enforcement, and military by being badge members, BADGE members, by subscribing to Peacemaker Network, PeacemakerNetwork.com. And if you would like to become a member yourself, just simply go to PeacemakerNetwork.com. Again, that's PeacemakerNetwork.com. And if you are a true crime junkie, we call it binge-casting.
Yep.
Just go to our archived podcast located at our website, charliecrimebuster.com. That's charliecrimebuster.com. And also, our podcasts are on many popular podcast platforms. Simply search for Charlie Crimebuster, or you can ask your smart speaker to play Charlie Crimebuster. But since you're streaming us here on YouTube tonight, simply click the subscribe button and you'll be notified each time we drop a new episode. So please do us the huge favor and press that subscribe button right now, and we thank you.
There you go. I'd like to just follow up on the PeacemakerNetwork.com, James.
Sure.
This morning I read about an unfortunate situation that happened in the Panhandle. Here we live in Florida,
Right.
And the Panhandle out there. This is Walton County. And just to let people know why on Charlie Crimebuster, we do support these brave men and women of law enforcement and the military and the first responders. It's because of stories like what happened yesterday. And this is a young man, young deputy, 38 years of age. His name, actually from Walton County, he was a young man, 38 years of age. And here's the thing about it. Officer May, M-A-Y, William May, he was not supposed to work this shift yesterday, but they were asking for volunteers, so he volunteered for overtime. His wife had actually asked him, please don't do that. You need to stay around to the house a little more, but that they really need me, and he took it. And at the end of his shift, James, there was a call about a disturbance at a dollar store, a Dollar General store. And he was on his way home, and he said, I'm close by. I know you're sending anybody else. I'll take it. He came, responded to the store, walked in. There was a gentleman causing the disturbance. And so, this happens a lot. All they were going to do is just trespass him. He was simply going to ask him to leave. He wasn't going to write him a citation. He wasn't going to take him to jail or anything, but he was just asking him to leave. And so he was escorting him out of the store, walking behind him. And when they went through that door, this suspect, this guy who was causing the disturbance, reached under his shirt, turned around with a revolver in his hand, and shot Officer May multiple times.
Oh, no.
Now, Officer May returned the fire and killed the suspect, killed the man who assaulted him with the gun. But unfortunately, one of those bullets reached under his vest and reached to him. And sadly, Officer May died on the operating table night into the morning. So this is the kind of thing that these guys face, James, every day.
Right.
It can happen just like that. Guy's on his way home,
Right.
from already volunteering to do overtime. And to me and to us here at Charlie Crime Buster, these men and women are heroes.
Oh, absolutely.
They are, and that's why
They are.
we support PeacemakerNetwork.com and encourage everybody that possibly can to go over there to it. So just wanted to kind of let folks know that when we talk about PeacemakerNetwork.com, we're not just talking to fill up time. We're talking about it because it's very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And hey, Jay, getting into our topic tonight, I'm really thrilled because in our studio tonight, I have my son, Donnie Jr., and he, my friend, is the one who's responsible for this podcast. Did you know that, James?
I did not know that. Well, thank you, Donnie.
He actually had a podcast he started himself where he would actually review books, and then he would invite the authors to come and talk about their books. And I thought it was a very intriguing podcast. And he encouraged me. He said, with your law enforcement background, you ought to start a podcast as well. He showed me how to buy the first microphone and showed me how to get it all set up. And he's the one that's really responsible for us getting into it. And he could not believe, James, that we now have over 200 episodes in the vault. What, 220, 230, something like that?
Podcasts, yes, but totally with Crime Talk, we have 297.
297. What do you think about that, Donnie?
That's pretty impressive, man. I mean, just hitting triple digits is amazing, but to keep on cranking on, that's I'll tell you what, that's one of the reasons I thought this would be such a great idea is that there's never a shortage of topics, in today's world.
That is so true.
Going on, and you guys do such a great job handling it, and I'm a number one fan.
All right. See,
Thank
there's
you.
one fan there. Okay?
Yeah. All right.
All right. Let's get
That's
into
great.
it. What we got going on?
Well, I just wanted to make folks aware of just one little thing here real quick before we get into our topics. But, this is April. This is tax month.
Yeah.
And so we would like to inform our folks of the IRS scam that's becoming popular as we near the tax time,
Oh, good. Yeah.
Just suppose, like, for example, suppose a caller calls and say they are an IRS agent and they contact you and tell you that you owe back taxes and you must pay immediately. But if you refuse to pay, they say, well, then we'll place a lien on your property or seize your bank account or even have the police come and take you to jail, Yeah. So,
Yeah.
But if you think you really owe taxes, simply go to the official IRS website, and that's https://irs.gov to find the real IRS phone number. Then call and contact the IRS to confirm that the information provided by the prior caller is correct. And if you do owe taxes, then you would have received a letter from them because they will only contact you by mail. They will not call you. They will not, they will give you contact information by mail. But again, if you think you have our own taxes, simply go to https://irs.gov.
That's great information, James. And I think really good that you mentioned that if you get a call from the IRS, it's not a call from the IRS.
It's not a call. That's right. It's
not
a
call. They send letters and sometimes they threaten, but they do not call. So that's what I love about our podcasts. We probably always try to throughout our podcasting is to share tips.
Yes.
And try to get lessons from some of these crazy things that we cover.
Yeah, that's true.
And the lesson about this one, we'll talk about that toward the end of the podcast tonight, though.
All right. I said, like in the first podcast, you called it unthinkable in referring to the case. What is unthinkable?
Well, there's two things unthinkable. First of all, it's unthinkable to me that the prosecution was saying their side of the story, and I was telling folks on the podcast, and Donnie Jr. got kind of tickled about that. I said, if you have not heard about this case, not only are you living under a rock, but you're on a rock on a desert island,
Yeah.
But the unthinkable thing was the prosecution basically, rather than saying that maybe she backed into him accidentally or something like that, they were basically saying that it was with intent. In other words, that she purposely ran him over. Mm-hmm. And it's unthinkable to me that she would do such a thing to such a nice, wonderful young guy,
right.
as this, who was also a police officer. So that's unthinkable. Mm-hmm. The second thing that was unthinkable to me in this whole situation was that the defense is alleging, that's what the prosecution says it's unthinkable. What the defense is saying that is unthinkable. It's unthinkable to me that there would be a police department and all the people involved in this, including the Canton Police Department and the Maryland or the Massachusetts State Police Department that they would actually be involved in an actual cover-up that been brought to the point that they were manufacturing and planting evidence. That's just unthinkable that something like that would happen. I'm not saying that either of those things could not happen. I'm just saying that both of those things are certainly unthinkable, which I think qualified this podcast right on the very tail end of our whole series of unthinkable things we've been talking about.
Well, recap the history of this case for our listening audience.
Yeah, well, it happened, believe it or not, all the way back to June of 2022. On June the 29th, 2022 is when this incident took place. And they had the first trial. Of course, it took some time to get it there, went to trial in 2024. And now we have the second trial coming up in 2025. And as often with these cases, there's always such a lag time, especially if these cases go to trial. So I know we see things on TV and we think, okay, boy, we have it, boom, we have the trial, and that's the way it goes. Not the way it goes,
No.
A lot of stuff that happens in between those things, and those things are all critical things. So, this happened all the way back in 2022. We're in 2025 now, and we're on the second round of the trial. And by the way, James, most second trials, it ends up in favor of the defense. And one exception of that, do you remember what that one exception was that we talked about? Was our Mendez brothers, remember?
Oh, yes.
That it was part of our unthinkable group,
That's right.
Second trial, it did not end up for the defense, it ended up for the prosecution.
Well, I was interested in your take on the blue wall. Tell us about it and how it has an impact on this case.
The blue wall. Well, people pretty well probably know about the blue wall, but if you don't, when you're a cop, when you're a police officer out on the street, as I was, and so many thousands of other guys that put on the badge, you realize really quick out there that you have to rely upon the person that's next to you. You got to rely upon your fellow officers. Got to rely upon your backup. There's anything in the world, and I've done that. I remember being with a suspect while I was really arrested and was taken to jail, but for some reason, James, he didn't want to go to jail. Can you imagine that?
Right. Imagine that.
He and I ended up wrestling in this yard, and man, I mean, he was bigger than I, stronger than I, but I kept hanging on and just trying to keep him pinned and all that sort of thing. And my backup called for my backup, and unfortunately, it was way out in the county, and it took maybe 15, 17 minutes for him to get there. But I got to tell you, there's no sound more beautiful to my ears, no sound better than hearing that siren of that backup officer. So what I'm saying is you depend on each other. And so you depend on each other out there. You basically grow a bond and you try to protect each other. And so that's what they call the blue wall. And sometimes the blue wall is used in court hearings where cops back up each other. And sometimes it can be good because you're backing up each other for the right reason. Sometimes it can be bad if any officer were to what some people call test a lie, they test a lie, and that could be bad. But I don't want the folks to get ahead of themselves here. What happens with police officers is common with everybody. You grow a bond with the people you work with, right? Whoever, if you work at a hospital, you grow a bond with the people you work with in the hospital. Work in the factory, you grow a bond with the factory. You just grow a bond with the people you're around. And so that's very normal for that to happen. And because you grow that bond does not mean that, if you work at a hospital and you're close to somebody, doesn't mean you're going to commit perjury, and around with perjury and lie. And it doesn't mean that at all, any more than it would mean that a police officer necessarily would. So, but the blue wall is there, no doubt about it. It can be used for good. It can be used for bad. The question is, was the blue wall in this case used for good in a good way, or was it used in bad in a bad way? That's the question.
Gotcha. Well, this is Karen's second trial. What stood out to you about the first trial?
Well, two things really stood out to me. One particularly. One thing that stood out to me was how this trial turned around in favor, I felt, of the defendant. And that was all because, and we talked about this in our last series. We've already done a whole series on this in the first trial.
Right.
But the first trial, we talked about somebody by the name of Turtle Boy. And he was a blogger and a podcaster who felt that Karen Reed was getting the wrong end of the deal. And he began to talk about and blog about that he thought that there was a cover-up, that he had died in another way, that he had been beaten up by somebody in that house, and that all these cops and all these people working together, and they were trying to throw her under the bus. They were making her the scapegoat, and he was so good at what he did which is really interesting. In most murder trials like this, you do not see people standing up for the defendant.
Mhm.
But this lady, James, instead of walking to a murder trial, it was almost like she was walking on the red carpet. I mean, they were applauding her when she was going into court. There was crowds outside applauding the defendant.
Wow.
And I remember one commentator said in all of his coverage, and he covered a lot of crime drama, crime activity cases, he said he never remembers any time ever being at a case where that defendant was applauded while he or she was going in the courthouse. And that's pretty amazing. So
Wow.
that really stood out to me. I mean, this trial divided the entire area there. There were people on overpasses with signs, free Karen Reed, free Karen Reed.
Right.
And never seen that much of an impact upon a groundswell of civilians that got involved in a trial. And I think that it did impact the jury. I think it impacted the case. I think it gave fuel to the defense attorneys to think that, hey, we're not facing all the government's lawyers and everything by ourselves. We got a lot of people behind us.
Well, refresh our audience on the ruling of the first case.
Well, the first case ended up in a mistrial. And we're finding out now, after the jurors have been talking, that there were 3 charges, 2 of them very serious, one a little more minor, but all of it serious. But 2 of them felonies with a long jail time, even up to life in prison. And they had actually agreed to find her not guilty on the 2 more serious charges. But they could not come to terms with that third one, which was like causing the death of other person by driving while intoxicated, something like that. And so the lesser charge.
Right.
They did not agree on that. And so they came to the judge, though. They did not tell the judge in their paper, in their document. They did not say we found her not guilty in these 2 charges. They just said that we are hung. We're a hung jury. We can't come to agreement on all charges. So the judge then declared a mistrial and dropped all 3 of those charges rather than saying we're gonna dismiss those 2 charges. So all 3 of the charges there are still together, and they're coming after the second time.
Wow. Well, why did the defense ask for a delay in this next trial?
Well, the defense found out that those jurors had made those decisions on those first more serious charges, so they appealed the verdict that she made, trying to get the 2 serious charges dropped, that you could not come back and try that again because of double jeopardy. And so they were trying to get that done. The first court would not hear it, so then they've appealed it to a Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, and they're waiting to hear the hearing from that court. So they did not want this trial to proceed because they were hoping that they could only charge that third less serious charge. And so they said, let's get a delay. Let's wait and hear from this court. That was why they were seeking a delay.
Well, why did the judge not grant the delay then?
Well, you're right. She did. She said, no, I'm not going to grant it. Well, one of the reasons is, and it makes a lot of sense, it is really hard. I mean, they're working right now to seat a jury, and it is tough. I mean, I saw the statistics, and it was just incredible how many people out of 90 people had heard about this trial, and many of them had already formed an opinion. So you think it was hard for them to find a jury the first time? It is going to be really hard to seat a jury this time. And she said, we've already set this, we've already set the summons out. We already have over 100 people responding. And, it would cause harm to the case if we did not begin right now and get on with finding a jury. And they're thinking that it could last 4 or 5 weeks even to get a jury together. And she said, I'm hoping that by that time, the higher court will rule on what the appeal is. And maybe we'll have an answer to that before we really get into the case. And she said, I may, if we haven't heard from them, I may consider a delay at that time after we already have the jury.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, now tell us about this jurist from the first trial that could impact this trial.
Well, this is really interesting too. I don't think I've ever heard of this happening.
I haven't either.
There was a jurist on the first trial. She was actually an alternate juror. An alternate juror is someone who is an alternate juror who has to stay in the courtroom, listen to everything that the seated jury listens to, so that if something happens, that they lose a juror, the alternate juror can step in and already have knowledge of the case and all that sort of thing. So she was an alternate jurist. She was an attorney, but she felt that the prosecution was so unfair to Karen Reed and her own feelings that Karen Reed was getting a bad deal, that she actually volunteered and went to the defense team and offered to join with them in helping to defend Karen Reed. I've never heard of that happening.
Interesting.
Have you ever heard of that happening?
No, I've never heard of that happening ever.
And so, that says to me and to our folks out there that this trial had such an impact, and was was really leaning, the first trial, according to the jury. I'm not saying I agree or anything, but I'm saying according to the jury, it was leaning toward acquitting her, especially of those two serious charges.
Wow. Well, tell us about the victim, John O'Keefe.
John O'Keefe, and this, and here you and I, we always with Charlie Crimebuster, try not to just rush over the victim. We
Correct.
try to help folks to remember that these crimes that we're talking about, these are real people. And I never met John O'Keefe, never knew anything about him until this happened. But my, what a wonderful guy he was. I mean,
Yeah.
you think about it, he was a young guy, 16-year veteran. There, they called him JJ. He was raised there locally in the area.
Mhm.
He went to high school, he went to college, got his BA, and then even bettered himself even more and turned around and got a master's degree in criminal justice. And so I mean, you can't imagine how dedicated he is to his role as a police officer, 16-year-old veteran. He comes from a family of police officers. I mistakenly said, and I don't know, I probably got emails from it because I did. I mistakenly said that his father was a police officer, but when his father, it was his grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Grandfather had the badge number 409.
409. Yep.
And when John went on the police department, he asked for that badge, but they couldn't give it to him because they already retired it. But they instead gave him the number 2409. So he still had the 409 in honor of his grandfather, and then had the 2. So you can see this guy comes from a family of law enforcement and people involved in that type of thing. But the greatest thing I can say about him and all that other stuff is there was some tragedy that happened. His sister, who was a parent to 2 kids, she died of cancer. And then that was some 9 months before this happened. And then right after that, 2 months after that, the father of the 2 children, which was his brother-in-law, died of a heart attack. And you know what, James? John stepped right in and took those 2 kids, a girl and a boy, and has raised them for several years as his own, loved them and taken them in and taken care of them. And keep in mind, he's done that while he's done all this other stuff, getting his degree, being a police officer. They loved him. They adored him. People say he's a fine man. Everybody respected him. He'd be the kind of guy I would love to sit down and talk to,
Right.
And it's bad that we can't.
It is sad. Well, tell us about Karen Reed.
Well, Karen Reed, on the other hand, I mean, she was a successful young lady. But interesting enough, she and John had met in high school, and they had spent some time together there. But then after high school, she went to college as well. She got a bachelor's degree and got a master's degree in finance, and was working as a financial planner, analyst for Fidelity. And her first job, though, took her to Ireland, and she was in Ireland for some time. And of course, as people do when they get away from high school, they go separate ways. And so her and John had not seen each other until then. We had the pandemic. We all remember the pandemic, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
And everybody was in. And so a lot of people were doing stuff online. And she came back from Ireland, and she was homebound, and she looked on Facebook and she saw John there. Well, she saw him with these kids, and she thought, well, he's married. But then she found out they weren't married. So then they connected, and that's how they got together. But here is a successful young lady who, by all means, is not somebody who's out there, like a drug addict or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't expect 2 nice people, a wonderful couple like that, to get pulled into something so sinister as this case is.
Right. Well, what could have changed in this whole case?
Well, interesting enough, what could change in this whole case was the night that this happened. There was a terrible blizzard, a northeastern, came into Canton,
Mm-hmm.
and it came in through the night and into the morning. And that's why, when we talk about the case, he was found face up in the snow in the yard of this other police officer there. And so this snowstorm was happening that morning when they got up. They had a little bit of argument, as couples do. He thought that she was spoiling the kids too much. Mm-hmm. And so, but she said, we got through that, and we were going to go out that night, but I talked to my father about 6 o'clock, and my father begged me, he said, please don't go out tonight. This is going to be a terrible night. The roads are going to be treacherous. I don't want you out. Please don't go. And she says, now get this, James. She says, I wish that I had listened to my father.
Mm-hmm.
Honey, you listen to your father. I wish I had listened to my father, because if I had done that, then John might still be alive today, because they wouldn't have went out that night.
Well, what happened on that night?
Well, that night, according to her, and there are two different views of this, but according to her, that night they went out to a bar there, and started about 9, 10 o'clock, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And around 11 or so, a little later, they moved to another bar, and there they met their friends that they had known, and they spent some time with their friends. And then the Alberts, Officer Albert, who was with the Boston Police Department, just like John was, they invited John and Karen to come to their house for an after party. And she said that they were invited for that after party, and so they got in the car and they were driving over there. And when they pulled up to the residence, they said they didn't see a lot of lights on. So she said, it was Albert's sister, Jen McCabe. She was the one that said that it was all right for us to come, but I want to make sure we're welcome. So just run up there and make sure we're welcome. And she says at that point, John exited the vehicle, went up to the second front door. This was a house that had one front door, and then down from it a little bit in front of the house, they had a second front door. So she said he left and walked and went into that front door. And then she kept waiting for him to come back, and he just wasn't coming back. And finally, after 10, 15 minutes, she was getting irate, She was calling, trying to reach him, and she thought he was just drunk in there having a good time, didn't think anything about her. And so she pulled off and went home. And so that's her version of it, of what happened. Now, the prosecution says what happened is she pulled up there, and they may have had an altercation, may or may not have, but that she put the car in reverse and backed up and hit him. And that caused him to lay in the snow that night, to be found the next morning. And that's what the prosecution says. The defense is saying that he went into that house, like she said, and that there was some kind of altercation fight in there, and that they had beat him up, and maybe he had fell and hit his head, was seriously injured, maybe even killed. And so that they had took him out and put him in that blizzard snow, thinking the snow would cover it up, and maybe they would think that she had done that. So that's the two different views that we're going to hear about in this case.
So what do you think really happened? What's your opinion?
You're not going to get by that easy. I'm not. It's crazy. This case, I've been back and forth. I actually have on one side and the other. I will tell you what I think happened. And if people would go back to that first series of podcasts, they would hear what I said thought happened. Mm-hmm. And they would, and I haven't changed my mind from what I said thought happened during that. But I will answer that as we get into it. Right now, I want our people to look at it. And I'd like to hear what they think about it, wouldn't you?
Me too, yeah.
Where do they think? I think, we've done this before on some cases. We might all put one of those surveys out there and see where the people are on this one. I think
I'll put a poll out there.
Yeah, let's put a poll out there and see what they're saying. But there is a lesson, I think, that we can find in this. She mentioned one other thing. She mentioned that, and I think this was just kind of a cut at the police department. I don't know whether she was trying to just say things to let it linger out there to make her look better or not. But she said that these cops there in Canton, in that area, that oftentimes they would go out and they would drink and, party, and then they would drive home drunk, and that nobody would pull over these police officers, which, is basically saying that these cops are ruling the way, and no cop should do anything like that. I mean, that's terrible, and I don't think that's the case today. It used to be the case, I think, more in the past when I was a police officer on the street before I retired. That thing did happen a lot. I'm not saying a lot of people. I'm saying a lot of cops would take care of each other out there if they caught them. And this one can't do that today, because what we have body cameras, right? And body cameras are on, and people are accountable, and people are listening to the scanner, and news reporters are watching it. And so if you pull over a car at night and they figure out that was a cop you pulled over, then more likely you better do something to that cop, or your job's going to be on the line, and they're going to say that you just let him go,
Yep.
But here's the thing. Everybody there had too much to drink. They should not have been out driving and drinking that night. And there's no way that you can't look at this thing and think that alcohol played a part in it. Played a part in it either way. Played a part in it if she was drunk and she was intoxicated and shouldn't have been driving. She may have hit him and not even known that she hit him.
True.
That could have happened. It would play a part if they got in there and they got into some sort of altercation. Probably it was be an altercation that they would not have gotten in otherwise if they hadn't had the influence of alcohol. That if they did beat him up and put him, out there, which I think is a stretch, but that's what the defense is saying.
Yeah,
So the lesson is, be careful. Don't drink and drive.
Yeah, true. Well, there was one thing that stood out to me in the podcast, and it was that how many injuries he had on his person that raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, especially the scratches on the arms. They were saying, somebody for the defense said that it looked more like a dog punctures, and it was a German Shepherd. There was a big dog in that house that night, and so the inference there is that dog probably saw that fight and got involved in it and bit him. But then then the prosecution comes back and says there was a broken taillight, right?
Mm-hmm.
That taillight could have scratched him going down his arm, when he flinged on it. So, but then there was the black eyes, and it was. But I got to tell you, James, I've seen some people who have been victims of car accidents, and sometimes they've looked pretty beaten up. I'm not saying that's what happened because I'm not going to say right now, but. I mean, there were some really strange things there. I think the strangest thing, and I think we talked about this in the first podcast, is that text that came from Jen McCabe, according to the computer expert, at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 something in the morning, that said how long to die in the snow.
Exactly.
Now, that text came, if that's right, and I that's what they testified.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. If that is correct. If they're not, unless they're reading it wrong or there was some sort of mistake with the data, if that text is true, then that means that he was lying out in the snow, and they knew that inside that house.
Absolutely.
And that to me is the biggie. That is, I think, I'm not saying it's enough to say that somebody did in there, but it's certainly enough to put reasonable doubt on this case for Karen.
Exactly. Yep. Definitely springs to mind the doubt aspect of it.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, look at the evidence that was collected in red Solo cups.
Yeah.
Who does
really?
that, right? Now, I understand where they're coming from. If the snow was there, it was melting, and they didn't want it, to melt in the snow, and they were trying to pick it up, and so they used the cups. But that's just not very professional. They should have a tech crime scene unit out there that knew how to preserve the evidence.
Yeah. Well, where's the DNA evidence of fragments of a person on the taillight?
Well, they are saying that they found his blood on that vehicle, and this is where the frame comes in. This is where the defense is saying that the prosecution, the cops, planted the evidence, because guess who had access to both the body and to that car?
Proctor.
And Proctor, right? Proctor, and Proctor's been fired, right?
Exactly.
He's fired from the case. He acted very inappropriately, and this is why cops, we got to go by the book. We can't take these shortcuts. We can't act in an inappropriate or unbiased way. Because of that, that's another reasonable doubt, right?
Right.
Exactly. I'm not saying that he did it, but at least he opened the door that people could believe that.
Exactly.
Because of his inappropriate way that he handled that investigation.
That's right. If you don't do it by the book, you're opening the case to suspect.
And so, there was blood found on the car, and it was his blood, but they're saying that there's more than one way for his blood to be there. Could have been an old cut, or could have planted there.
That's true. Well, thank you, Charlie. This was a great.
Don't you see, man? This goes both ways in the like a speeding train, right?
It does. It does. You can.
One time, it sounded like the prosecution, and now it sounds like the defense is right. So this is really good whodunit. And folks, vote on this poll. We want to know what you guys are saying that really happened.
Yeah, the door swings 2 ways on this one. It's kind of catchy. No, this was good. This is a lot of good content. And you actually covered in some additional information that was not on the podcast. But for those that have not heard the podcast, go back and listen to it. There's more information that was not disclosed here. But yeah. Thank you, Charlie.
So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep. For the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com, or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.